person, and he can't put the family.
Being there on time. Now, I'm not saying a thing about
No,
you. My father really thought it was sinful not to be wherever you're supposed to be on time. He used to take my traveling bag and go on before I was ready to the train or to whatever. And I said one day, Mama, what is he going to do with my baggage if the train should happen to be on time one time and I wasn't? She said, oh, he'll put it on. That's what he took it for. And church and my...
But they have a...
Alrighty, if we'll begin and you tell us about food and if you think it's better now or better then.
Well, there are more foods now, and we're more conscious of vitamins and such, but food was cooked well and thoroughly, and it wasn't milled to death back in the 20s and 30s. We didn't have packaged foods. We bought it by the bulk, and all of the rising and everything was put into it separately. We didn't buy it already ready. You can almost buy foods ready to put in the oven these days, and we didn't then. We bought it and assembled it ourselves. And the wood stoves, to my knowledge, were better. They didn't dry out things like the gas and the electric stoves do. Food was really better, but we couldn't have had the variety because the stores didn't have it like they have now.
Fine. Materials used in making clothes, and most of it was homemade, sewn, knitted, crocheted, and just give us a comparison for how clothes were made and worn then versus now.
Well, people were more conscious of being dressed up. They were not casual. They put on their hat and their gloves and sometimes a little veil, just going to church or to market. They didn't have play clothes as we know them. They had waists and skirts, and they had what they call their Sunday dresses, and then they had everyday dresses, which were cotton. And the mothers made the clothing on the machine and did a good deal of finger work. And there was more trimming to ladies' garments and children's garments in those days. There was lace, which was crocheted, and lace, which was bought. And they made tatting, and they made their own buttonholes. There was no such thing as a zipper, and it took a good while to make a garment. But they turned you around and around when they turned up the hem to see that it was exactly right. And they put pleats in things and tucks and smocking. There was more fancy dressing, but we didn't buy them at the shop. They were all made at home. You went to the store and you bought the buttons, the thread, and the material all to match, and a pattern. And most of us we had the Vogue magazine, McCall's magazine, and all that, and they came through the mail. They came monthly, and my mother studied those, and she knew what was in vogue, what was fashionable at the time. But people didn't have as many changes. They had dress-up clothes, and they had what they termed everyday clothes, but there wasn't play clothes or casual clothes, and nobody had ever heard of a woman wearing a pair of jeans or slacks. And everybody wore dresses and skirts, and they took a good deal of pride in looking well, and they took pride in the sewing itself. They wanted every garment to be turned out well.
That's fine. Happily involved yourself and prepared for the county fairs.
Well, the county fair, we were usually instructed in school. In high school, they were different Shall I start over?
Yeah, we'll start the county fair in a second. It'll be a minute, but we need to back up. Just take it from where we are. Alrighty, again, if you would tell us about how you prepared for the county fair.
In high school, there were different projects which we could undertake to send to the county fair, which was out here at Warner Park. And we took a great deal of interest and enthusiasm. We baked cookies for the cooking contests, and some people made, some of the students would make cakes, or else they entered their canning products. And then we could do our sewing. We could do embroidery and crochet, and we would enter that into the sewing department. And then there was the writing. We would write and draw. The maps were very popular in those days, and you could make them in different ways. A map of the United States was very popular if you drew that and put in all the states and all the shorelines, and it was sure to bring a prize. And then if you had the talent for it, you were asked to write a poem about something that happened in school, and you did that. And sometimes if you were drawing, they would have you to illustrate your little story that you wrote, and you do that with a pen. And then there was the outside things which you could do. You could enter the chicken contest at most any age, and you could have the purebred chickens and enter a pen of chickens for the fair. And they had to be groomed. You had to do a good deal of work. And the teacher would tell you how to do and what was permissible and what wasn't. You had to go strictly by the rules, but it gave you a good deal of pride and satisfaction to go to the fair and see your booth and see a few blue ribbons in it.
That's real good. Work ethic, then versus now. How do you feel about the work ethic, how people subscribe to it then, how they feel about it now? We're ready.
The working man's day was longer then. He stayed with his job 10 hours. But most men took a great deal of pride in whatever they were doing. If they were doing woodwork, they wanted it to be perfect. And if they were plowing, they wanted the row to be straight. They wanted their crops to be good. They didn't want weeds to grow or crabgrass to grow, and they took a hoe and went to work on it to see that it didn't happen. I don't think people nowadays use the hoe. They just go down the middle with a piece of machinery and call it a day. They just don't go back. And if crabgrass crowds, or you have to hunt through the weeds to get the tomatoes, that's just part of the way they are farming these days. They don't take that particular pain. And almost everyone was not watching the clock. He was thinking about his boss, the owner of the factory or wherever he worked, and he tried to put in as good a day as possible. The pay was not nearly as much as it is now, but expenses were not that great, and you could do something with a quarter in those days, like buy your lunch. And that makes a good deal of difference. But now I think people are casual about their working conditions and about their work, and maybe not as prideful of the turning out a good job as they used to be. But they're getting a lot done, and there's a lot of help. There's plenty of things to use to save time. Now, what we're doing with the time, I don't know whether that's progressive or not, but we do have all the buttons to push that cause us to save those seconds.
That's real good. Combine these two together. The first time that you saw a car come down the road, you're telling me you and your brother ran up from the school and watched it go by, and it was whizzing by at 15 miles an hour. If you can tell that, and then go right on and tell how the first time you drove a car.
The first time we saw a car, it was a Ford, of course. It was a Ford Touring, and they were so rare in our neighborhood, or any other neighborhood for that matter, that when we were at school, my brother and I dropped our bat and ball and ran up to the highway to see the Ford go by, because he blew his horn about 2 miles up and we had plenty of time. And we were not the only ones who made it. Everybody along the road came out to see the car, and he was going at a rapid rate of about 15 miles an hour, and we watched him until he was just a dot going down the highway. Then we went back and we had something to talk about. We had seen a car. And now, when we are there and we want to get in the highway, we have to wait sometimes 10 to 12 minutes before we can even get onto the highway because of the traffic. But it was rare to see a car, maybe one or two a day, and then they picked up. But when I first drove a car, there wasn't much traffic in my way. I didn't have to dodge it. I had to think about the trees, and I had to think about the telephone poles and the edge of the road. Now, we thought we had a big road, but it wasn't. It was narrow. I know now that it was very narrow. And I had to be sure I was over. And there wasn't any line to guide you, no outside line, no middle line. You just had to take your chances and do the best you could. And your brother or your father taught you how to drive, because sometimes you might need to. In our family, my father thought that the girls needed to swim, shoot a gun, drive a car, because someday, if they were in that place, he wanted them to take care of themselves. We were taught to take care of ourselves. And driving a car was one of the things. Someday, maybe the driver would have a heart attack or something, and we would need to take hold. And it was years before I had one of my own, but of course that was one of our ambitions. And we didn't have to take any driver's test, and we didn't have to be a certain age. Just know how to get there and back was all we had to do.
That's fine. That's real good. Okay. All the different things, not all the things, but a few of the things that you used to do to recreate, and I think especially that story when you told about how you'd hop on the train up at Sail Creek or whatever and come on down to different locations and go swimming or go picnicking. Tell us a bit about the different things, variety of ways you recreated.
When we were children, there were games to play. And as we grew older, there were games to play and parties. That would be in the wintertime when you stayed in. And there was corn to pop, and there was different things to do by the fireside. And we had reading aloud in those days, and that was a form of entertainment. And also, the older people would tell us stories of their childhood, which we thought was very amusing. We thought we had come a long way and had improved on their way of life. And the distance they had to walk to school and so forth. We thought that was strange. And in the summertime, we could go on picnics. We went hiking, we went swimming, and sometimes camping. And the train was part of our everyday life. It stopped at every station. We had the local train. You could go off in the morning and come back by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And you could take your picnic dinner and go down. You could catch the tag here in Chattanooga and go down into Georgia a long ways, and then you could hike up on the mountain where the Cloudland Park was and DeSoto Park in the edge of Alabama, and that was a good camping place. They had horseback riding. We had horseback riding at home as well, and we could swim in the river then. There was no commercial things like there are out there now. It was just a wilderness, and the road was gravel. But we didn't mind that, and if it's a little dusty, which it sometimes was, we didn't mind that either, because we had a good day in the open and we enjoyed it. That was one of our things that we did. And of course, there were always programs at the school to look forward to and programs at the church. And we had ice cream suppers, we had pie suppers, and we had box suppers, which I believe they're all unknown now. But they were fun, and you could be most any age and enjoy that. And then they would rifle off a cake for the most popular girl, and that was a popular thing to do, or the prettiest girl, or something like that. And if your cake brought about $15, you were very proud of that.
That's excellent. That's fine. Just one more. Appreciated the love that was present, especially at Christmas time, how Christmas was so special to the family.
We celebrated all holidays at home, and we never did stop doing that. All the birthdays, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and all. And my mother especially promoted it. She wanted us to have a good time, and she would rather we were at home than scattered around where she didn't know. Well, she usually knew where we were. At least she knew where we were supposed to be. And all of us were privileged to bring someone home from school or from church, and there was always plenty to eat. And that was one of the things, that was why we so seldom sat down to the table, just our family. It was really strange because when people came a distance on horseback or however they came or walking, people walked in those days. They stayed for dinner. Sometimes they stayed overnight. That would break their trip and rest them and nobody thought anything of putting out the energy to walk. We've lost a little of that art, I believe, along with a few other things that we're losing, like the art of conversation and writing letters and so forth. At Christmas was a special time, and after the older ones were married, they came home too. And my father always, when I was one of the youngsters, would pretend for Santa Claus, and he would leave his track in the ashes in the fireplace, and then he would go, as he said, to get the paper, which you had to go to the post office in those days to get. But what he was doing, well, he did go get the paper, but he went out to the corn crib and put on the Santa Claus suit and came back. But I never did recognize him. And when he would come home with the paper, and I know it must have been cold out there in the crib to put those clothes on in the cold, but he didn't mind that. That was part of Christmas. And I'd say, "Oh, Papa, you've missed Santa Claus again. That's a shame you miss him every year." And nobody laughed. It was a very solemn occasion. We also hung up our stockings. And there would be some things in the stockings and maybe a doll peeping out or a horn for them. They were just small toys. You could get a pretty good toy for a quarter. When I got a $2 doll, it was just magnificent. It was just a good doll for $2. It did all the things a doll could do in those days. It bent and it went to sleep. It wasn't called on to do anything else. Its arms would move and its legs would move, and it was a lot of fun. And I enjoyed my dishes. So I got dishes every year because something happened to them, like a brother shooting a big marble right through the table. Sometimes he'd do it on Christmas Day, and off went handles and off went lids. But he had to try out his marbles, and I had to set the table. I never did get over liking dishes. Well, we had a program at the school, and we had a program at the church. And our mother took as good care of our being dressed just right and acting just right as if we were really going to Hollywood. And sometimes my father fretted a little, and he said, "Well, now this is not a style show. It's all right if the children don't look perfect," she said. "When they're up on the platform, any little flaw will show. I want their hose to be right. I want their dresses to be right, their ribbons to be right, their hair to be right." And she turned us and twisted us till sometimes it wasn't worth it. I got tired of being going over sometimes. And then we made mistakes, and
Excuse me. Don't think me rude, but the little baby boy.
Yes, you did. And a little girl, a little older.
Yes.
How are they?
She's 2.5. They're fine. He's at the point now where he crawls around. He can crawl over to the couch, reach up, pull himself up on the couch, and then kind of make his way along the edge. And then if this chair were a little nearer where he could reach out and grope with one hand, then he could turn with the other and come over here. And he's just ever so alert. You look at him, and he's just always wide-eyed, constantly.
You really had Christmas with two that
Yes,
age.
it was nice. It was.
He won't remember this one, but he will next year.
I think so. Ashley really enjoyed this Christmas. It was. She showed so much self-control. All those packages under the tree for about 3 or 4 weeks, and she didn't open any. Waited until the appointed time. That's finally. So, yeah, it was just a thrill. And I tell you something. There doesn't have to be